big welcome to all of you. It's so wonderful to see these familiar faces and new faces too. Jim is our speaker tonight, is a presenter, and he's researched the interurban for years and years, maybe 50 years practically.
Maybe in the late 1980s. I was at a wedding one time. I'm a photographer. I was photographing a wedding, and Jack Rollenhagen walked up to me. He says, "You know anything about the interurban?" I didn't know a lot, except I heard my grandparents and parents refer to the interurban. They called it the interurban. That's about all I knew about it. So Jack started schooling me on just what it was about. Introduced me to the relics that are around, and we brought one of them back, and we've been restoring it. So.
And Jack was a young boy when the interurban came through Unica, and Jack was quite the interurban historian and local history buff also too. And anyway,
We better get started.
we better get started.
Okay, here we go. Now, when the interurban was proposed, there was talk of having 3 interurbans in Grand Rapids. And the reporters and pundits were getting a little upset. So they borrowed this cartoon from the Indianapolis News showing how it would be in Grand Rapids with all these interurbans running around, plus the trolleys and so forth. I like this one. You can see there's some feet sticking out from underneath. This guy's getting clubbed by one of the employees. People going over bridges and chaos, in other words. But the interurban companies won out. There were 3 of them that entered Grand Rapids. One of them was the one that came north of the river, and it was called Grand Rapids, Grand Haven, and Muskegon. And that's the one we're going to be talking about today. There was another one that went south of the river and went down to Saugatuck and that general area. The third one went straight south to Kalamazoo. Here's kind of a promotional ad that the interurban had. You can see there, people always ask me, why do they sit so high? But that's what they were. They sat quite high. And they were electric. The motors were mounted in the back of the vehicles, and they had this on the front. It's not a cow catcher. It's called a fender. I think it was more for people. They could catch them by the legs, and they could sit on them instead of running over them. So we're going to start in Grand Rapids. This is Oaks and Ellsworth. That intersection today would be Oaks and Granville. They had 2 buildings like this. This is obviously a freight house. And on the other side, you can see peeking out is interurban freight cars. Here's the other side of one of the buildings. They had 2 buildings. You can see the freight cars lined up to get the freight. They also had a siding that went down to the market on Market Street. So Oaks and Market down in that vicinity was the market. That's probably why they named the street Market, because there was a market down there. On to Ottawa Avenue. This was where their main headquarters was located, in the Houseman building here. And across the street is the Waters building, and that building is still there today. But you can see the 2 interurbans. Not much car traffic back in those days. It wasn't until later on that they had to deal with that. They could travel around town. This is a picture of car 10 on Monroe Avenue during some sort of celebration. This was then taken later on, perhaps after World War I. That's hard to say. The car is more updated. It's got a anti-climber on it, so it probably would. And it had a boiler in it. And when they put a boiler in those cars, they had to move the whistle up to the top of the car. Why did they put a boiler in? Because the heat was initially generated by electricity. And when they got out in the country and gave it the full throttle, the motors used up all the electricity. So the people were freezing. So they had to do something different. They put a boiler in there, it was coal fired, and they had water heat running along the baseboards to keep the passengers warm. And anyway, to get there, it was called the third rail line. And this is what they look like. These are the overriding shoes that rode along on the third rail. And you can see insulators here, keeping it off the ground so that it didn't short out. There was over 600 volts of DC electricity flowing through these third rails. It's not like a Line L train, which has a third rail in the middle. Ours had it on the side. I think it was about 20 inches from the center of that rail to the center of this rail. And that's how they operated. Except in the cities. In the cities, they used overhead trolleys, just like the trolley cars did, for safety reasons. Imagine stepping on that thing. It'd be a little bit of a shock. In the book, it says that it would have been a shock, but it may not have been enough to kill you. As we're leaving Grand Rapids, the Interurban used Bridge Street Bridge. This particular Interurban is coming into town. You can see the trolley's up and it's going that way. This is the back end of the Interurban. It's probably the conductor sitting there. Each Interurban had a motorman, which drove the train, and a conductor, which took care of the overhead trolley and the passengers and so forth. They had a manual gravity-fed bathroom in these Interurbans. So when they came into a city, the conductor had to lock the bathroom so nobody used it while they were in town. They came up Bridge Street and then they went down Scribner to Leonard Street. Leonard Street had kind of a sharp turn. If you're going faster than you should have, then this could happen to you. This is early on, and you can see the Interurban tipped over here. The kids are having a good time climbing around it. So, they must have had some hardy guys working on the rail back then to get those things back on the trucks. By the way, when I say trucks, it's the wheel sets. You can see them right here. Those are called trucks. A little further on Leonard Street, later on, they built this building. Some of you might recognize it as Arnie's Restaurant. The only part of Arnie's Restaurant that's left is the part of this building, because this burnt recently, and they never reopened. Not sure why, but anyway, this was a freight house. When they came into the city, they bought power from the trolley company that was existing in the Grand Rapids area. And so by building this building closer to the toll gate, they paid less for electricity because they didn't travel as far. The other one, they had to go all the way through Grand Rapids and out to Oaks and Ellsworth to pick up freight. Anyway, you can see the Teamsters all over there with their baggage and so forth. On the other, there's a siding, a Y right there, you can turn the cars around. And in the back, they could line up back there. The Interurban cars could be loaded and unloaded and so forth. You can see a lot of wires and so forth. Look at those poles up there. Can you imagine all the electricity that was being flowed through? This isn't Interurban electricity. These are power lines that are going to businesses and so forth. As we proceed west, again, the Interurban in this picture is going in, but picture it going out. This is the cemetery. There's a Greenwood Cemetery and the Catholic Cemetery on this side. So the trolley's going out, or the Interurban would be going. That's a trolley coming in. This is a little further on the other side of the cemeteries. You can see they're still on the overhead. And there's a siding here, probably a big Y. Somebody said they had a gravel pit over there. They could pick up gravel or sand for working on the bridges and so forth. Where they checked in was on Covell Road in Leonard. So they had a gate there, and once you got past that going into Grand Rapids, you're on the trolley overheads. Beyond that, you were on interurban property, and that was fenced in because they had that hot rail running on it. This is Oakley in Leonard. A little waiting booths to keep you, so you had a place of shelter while you're waiting for your interurban to come by. A little further out, we come to Walker Station. Now, when the interurban went in, it was strictly them. They owned the property on both sides. It wasn't until much later on that they sold some of the property to the state of Michigan, as you'll see in the next picture. This is a picture of what we call Remembrance Road now. Back then, like I say, they sold some of the property to the state. You can see they have a 2-lane road here. When they went out of business totally, the state bought all the property. That's why Remembrance Road is kind of wide. And that's the reason it was originally an interurban property. Something happened here, not sure what, but one of the freight cars tipped over. So we're still heading westerly. Next town we come to is Berlin, or now we call it Marne. And you can see the station there. Looks like that car, I think, is either car 101 or car 99. Car 99 they call the Red Devil. All the cars had a name. The one we have at the museum is called Merlin. And I don't know what the other car here is, but this is Berlin or Marne. Another shot of it. And that building burned in 1913, and by 1914 they had rebuilt, and this is what it looked like after the rebuild. Now you got to remember, this is a freight house, not a substation. The one I showed you in Walker was a substation, and the one in Coopersville is a substation. What they did is they brought AC electricity into those buildings and converted them into DC electricity to run the interurbans on. This is now a restaurant in Marne, as you probably know, Depot Cafe, a nice restaurant. Breakfast and lunch, I believe. It took a lot of people to keep these things going. There's some of the guys that are working, posing for a picture right now. Anyway, here's another picture. I have a picture someplace. I didn't find it for this showing, but it showed a group of people. And they had their dogs with them and guns. So maybe while they're working, they also could do some hunting. Here we are coming into Coopersville. This is the bridge over Deer Creek. And you can see Main Street back there going up to the school that was built in the late 1860s. That building was moved down to Main Street, and it's still there. Lori Wallace owns it. You can sit right over there. Anyway, it's an apartment now, and they built the 1908 building up here, and that was torn down a few years back. Here they are coming down Main Street. This is Lily's department store here. This building over here is where Troop's Funeral Home is now. And back then it was Colin C. Lily's house. And over here was Parker Hardware. That building also burned. But in the lower portion is now Phillips Jewelry. But you can see the interurban ran right down Main Street. And there's our museum, which back then was the Coopersville substation. You can see the top part of it where they brought electricity in here and converted it inside to DC electricity to run the interurbans. They have the freight doors here. They can put a small amount of freight in the side of the building. You can buy a ticket in the front part. The back part you weren't allowed to go in because they had the converters back there. It was kind of dangerous. Next to it, if some of you are from Coopersville, was the Observer printing business where they printed the newspaper back in the day. Here's a picture of a party in Coopersville. I like this picture because down here they've got the vendors, and one of the things they always sold was hot peanuts. The peanut wagons were there. over in the background, you can see one of the Interurban's, car 103, it looks like, coming into the siding at the Interurban station. And behind the Interurban station, they had a freight house, so they could store freight back there. Some of the people that worked on the Coopersville gang, the hand car, you can see the observer building here, here's the printing building, and the substation. Oh, this is a nice picture. You can see the freight house back here. There's a side door where they could load baggage and, or freight, and the main door's over here. Somebody's hauling something in over here. Looks like they got a little thing built on to make it a little bit warmer inside, to keep the cold air from getting in. Inside the substations, this is what it looked like. They took AC electricity to run these, and they made DC electricity to run the trains. By the way, if you wanted to go to Muskegon from Grand Rapids, it cost 75 cents. If you wanted to go to Grand Haven, it cost 65 cents. This is the inside of the car. Motormen usually wore an outfit like this, and the conductor was a little fancier. He had an outfit like this. If you go in our car now, this is the bathroom that they used to lock up. Anyway, that was rebuilt by John Pritchard, and the materials were funded by the Lemon family over here. So you appreciate it. Now we're getting close to Denison. There were 3 stops in Denison: East Denison, downtown Denison, West Denison. This is obviously one of the stops. Yeah. This is the West Denison. They also call this Malone's Crossing. And there's a Catholic church right up the road, as you probably know, St. Michael's. And the priest would come from Grand Haven on the Interurban, get off here, and somebody would be there with a wagon, take him up to the church, say Mass, and then he'd come back and get on the Interurban and go back to Grand Haven. It was a mission church, so they didn't have a permanent priest up there. This is Crockery Flats. Sometimes this is flooded. You can see this is car 99, or the Red Devil, and this is their pile driver that they used for securing some of the bridges and sinking trestles. They had when they built the Interurban, they built it kind of fast, and some of the areas were built over swampy areas, and they were sinking, so they were constantly trying to shore everything up. There's the guys that did it. You can see the 3rd rail behind them. Looks like they're at an intersection, because that piece of wood right there would guide the shoe back on the track on the 3rd rail. This is Crockery Flats. Looks like high water. The picture was probably taken from the Grand Trunk trestle, looking at the Interurban. By the way, in 1905, there was a massive flood, and the Grand Trunk bridges were washed out. But the Interurban survived. They had some damage to their bridges, but they did survive. Now we're coming into Nunica. This would be, I suppose, what is it, Maple Island? No, 112 or whatever it is in town there. And that house, I believe, is gone now. There's a substation right over here, about where the old Interurban freight house was located. Nunica. Now in Nunica, they didn't use the overhead trolley, they ran straight through with the third rail. There you can see the third rail. Now when you came to intersections, they had shoes on all four shoes on, two on the front truck and two on the back truck. When they went across an intersection, the front shoe would lose contact through here, and it would pick it up over there. Meanwhile, the back shoe was still on the contact, or maybe they were going fast enough they could glide across there. Sometimes they did. We've left Nunica, we come up to an area called the Junction.